You know, people say I approach reviews like this with a heightened level of bias, which actually causes me to seem as though I just view farm with these videos based around the fact that I get irrationally angry, and that's what people have come to expect. So let's perform a little experiment. I'm going to review this album more like a conventional reviewer, more like somebody that you would read in a magazine or online. And then you will see that the emotion, that the elevation, or the way in which my voice and my vocal inflection changes is critical to online reviewing, especially video reviewing. We're here to talk about the new Memphis May Fire album, which is entitled Unconditional. This is the band's fourth album. They're currently going to be on tour with bands such as Hands Like Houses, and I definitely can draw some comparisons, at least vocally, in some of the vocal patterns with some work from Atreyu, especially their early work on albums such as The Curse and Suicide Notes and Butterfly Kisses. And the vocals are able to blend a element of rough and clean vocals, with the cleans usually coming around the time of choruses, either that or bridges, to kind of emphasize the more anthemic portions of the track, whereas the verses are done in a rough style, principally to convey an emotion. It's meant to convey perhaps an internal monologue, something that has a little bit more depth to it, and is trying to drive home the message of the song prior to the anthemic chorus. Musically speaking, these guys could be seen as a blend of both metalcore, perhaps a little bit of deathcore, and some people may even go so far as to say there's a bit of the emo culture in this band as well. Some people may incorrectly tag them as such, when in reality they have a lot more metallic elements. In fact, they are definitely a heavier version of the band Atreyu, which I mentioned before, which you will principally see in pop rock sections at your local music store. Now, this 11-track affair is definitely one that is able to cater to all of the different fans of these genres, and each individual track is going to do so in a way that will give them exactly what they want. There's definitely a heaviness to this record. There's definitely a lot of meaning and thought behind the vocals. There's plenty of reasons that individuals will very much get behind the lyricism that is on this album, considering there are many speaking points about sleepless nights, basically being lost in thought, that beauty is something that is seen beneath the skin as opposed to being right there on the skin, the visual element that you see whenever you are walking down the street, as well as other things. This is definitely something that applies to a lot of individuals that perhaps feel as though this is not true, that this is something where these vocal lyrics are actually more true than what is socially expected and socially acceptable, and really is something that needs to change, something where we need to focus a lot more on what an individual has to offer as opposed to just what they are. Musically speaking, this definitely caters to all of those different subgenres, but also adds an orchestral element, and the orchestral element blends very nicely with the music in order to give it a little bit more of a heightened prose, a little bit of a heightened dynamic. It's something where the music itself is able to cascade nicely enough, but the orchestral element provides a little bit of diversity and gives it a little bit more of an emphatic feel, something that is perhaps sorely missing from this element, but at the same time something that has become a little bit more commonplace with other bands trying to take this on in order to give the music a little bit more of a heightened diversity and a heightened element of perhaps completion. It's something that surrounds the element as opposed to just being layered atop of it to give it more of a three-dimensional effect, more of a cinematic effect. In fact, the band themselves said that this album could be seen easily as the soundtrack to an action film, and you could definitely see that with some of the elements that you hear. Some of the lyricisms even are very true, where action films try to teach a lesson as opposed to just having it be 100% non-stop action for no good reason. Now, whenever you add all of this together, what you have is an album that, for its genre, is certainly very strong, but on the overall scope sounds very generic. It's an album that definitely has all of the right things going for it, but at the same time, in the grand musical scope, just kind of lumps itself into a subgenre and a subcategory. They're basically just another name in a hat full of names that are just like them. What really provides Memphis May Fire with a certain element of uniqueness is certainly the addition of the orchestral element, but also the fact that they leak their own records. So they're a band that understands that you have to get yourself out there and promote yourself as opposed to just really wait for release day and pray that everybody comes out. It's something where they give fans the opportunity to sample the album, and definitely that has increased some sales, either that or at least increased awareness for the album, which certainly has worked to their benefit. Musically speaking, this is one that will go down, no doubt, for Memphis May Fire fans as a true signpost of a little bit of musical evolution and a little bit of emotional maturity. This is an album that, while it still has anthemic traits and really some lyrics that seem to be promoting some ideas that aren't exactly that, uncommon in this style of music, still does show a certain level of diversity, not to mention a certain level of emotional maturity, where it is not something where it just needs to be driven by anger, but instead those rough vocals and those anthemic choruses can cascade together in order to try to promote a true message, a message that perhaps everybody needs to examine a little bit more closely in their lives and try to spread this message to others. That was really boring, wasn't it? I felt bored doing that. That's the reason why I convey my emotion throughout my reviews. This album really isn't all that great. It's not bad, but it's not necessarily, it's not terrible either. It's kind of just run-of-the-mill. I do enjoy the fact that Memphis May Fire did put forth quite a bit of an effort with this one, and I do enjoy the orchestration that has been, given to this album. The kind of the extra mile has been taken and tread in order to get this album perhaps over that level of just being completely and totally generic, and instead it makes this album at least a little bit more feasibly different than that which you hear from other bands like this. That being said, unfortunately, whenever you're in a crowd like this, it's very hard to differentiate. Either that or hard to really stand out amongst all of them. You really have to really cater to your fan base and try to use the other bands within your subgenre in order to spread your own commercial appeal, which is definitely something that Memphis May Fire has been able to do because they are charting, not to mention they're a band that does have a wide fan base. I do like this album on the idea that they decided to expand their horizons a little bit, and they have, in fact, based around their prior albums, especially with the lyrical approach and the musical approach, reached a certain level of maturity and have stepped up their game a little bit more, that way to cater to their entire audience instead of just focusing on perhaps an angry youth. So overall, this is an album that I would not necessarily recommend to you, Nation. However, this is an album that I certainly would recommend to anybody who likes bands such as Memphis May Fire. This is certainly an album that will go very, very well along with your existing collection, and one that you will enjoy definitely for the time frame in which you enjoy it. Whether that's 3 days or whether that's 3 years is really up to the individual listener, but I certainly hope that you enjoy it. Yeah, that was really hard to do, especially after that Limbs cover. JK, if you don't know what I'm talking about, follow the link.